For the data visualization section of the practice activity, you're going to end up making 4 different graphs, and there will be a separate video for each of these graphs, so it's a little bit easier to find the procedures when you're doing the Activity 1 tasks for this week. The first graph we're going to make is a bar graph from the simple frequency distribution that we created in practice 3. The first graph we're going to make is a bar graph from the simple frequency distribution that we created for the number of pull-ups that our group performed. So when we're using a simple frequency distribution, the starting point of the distribution is not always going to be 1. So I wanted to show you guys how to make the bar graph in a way that you can specify what your x-axis value should be in the event that this number, or like the first number in your distribution, is not 1. So to start, we're going to highlight our frequency values. We will go to the Insert tab, and then the column or bar graph is this first option here. We'll do a regular 2D column, or regular 2D bar graph. And then you'll see in this chart, and I'll keep things right here so we don't get distracted by these other numbers, you'll see that the frequencies for people who performed 1 pull-up were at 2, and then so on and so forth. Okay? When you only highlight one column or one section of data, the x-axis will automatically number from 1 till however many rows of cells you have in that highlighted range. Let's say that we had somebody, or like the minimum number of pull-ups was 3. Okay, if we didn't want these values down here at the bottom to start at 1, what we could do is right-click on the graph and go to Select Data. This window will look a little bit different between Windows and Mac computers. But under the horizontal X or axis category labels area, if you choose this little chart selector icon, you can then specify the values that you want in your x-axis. Now for us, it's still going to be 1 through 20, but if you had started this, or the minimum number of pull-ups that people were able to complete in our class started at 3 or 5, that would change what appears in this x-axis to match the range of values that you've highlighted in this area. So that's just for the sake of the example, but that's how you would change your x-axis values if they automatically get numbered from 1 to whatever. There are a couple of other things that we need to add to this chart. So for our class, you always need to have a chart title. We could put, let's just say number of pull-ups performed by the swim class, because those are the people that we used. Okay, or swim team, whatever. Let's say team. I like that better. We also need to add some titles for our primary horizontal axis as well as our primary vertical. You'll notice the way that I'm adding these is add chart element. Over here, you should have a chart design tab. If you're in a Windows computer, and you have the desktop version of this app, you should see a plus sign in the upper right hand corner. So you can also add chart elements using that green plus sign, but that's not included in Mac, or the Mac version of Excel. I'll change my x-axis to the number of pull-ups, because that's 1 through 20 represents the number of pull-ups that were performed. My y-axis is going to represent the frequency or the number of people that were able to complete each set or each given number of pull-ups. I want to change my y-axis values so that they are increasing by an interval of 1. And just so I have a little bit of extra space on top, we'll make sure the maximum value is 3. Okay, so since we can't have half of a person, right, or half of people, having whole numbers is just a little bit nicer looking. Okay, so chart elements on graphs like the bare minimum, you should have a chart title that, I just realized I spelled that wrong. You should have a chart title that generally represents what is in the graph. Okay. You should have a y-axis label with the appropriate values and an x-axis label with the appropriate values. Sometimes when we have data that have units of measurement, such as like plank time, then we would want to also add the units of measurement in the axis label. Okay, but this is what our frequency distribution would look like using a bar graph.